Hello, welcome to our podcast, the Netto Fairbanks Directive. My name is Luca Netto, and this is
Cameron Fairbanks. Today we'll be doing our podcast and we'll be covering a very, very, very controversial topic, sin. So, Luca, what would you say sin is?
I would say sin is a direct offense against our reason and logical standing and against God, leading us away from God and towards our vices.
I think the thing about sin is that it's inherently an irrational act. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We go against what we truly know God loves, and we decide to go against that. It's a terrible action that harms others.
Yes, and our relationship with God as well.
I feel like our relationship with God is something that is very important, and it's actually the top priority of humans. So, sinning ever is really bad because you're destroying that bridge between you and God.
Yes, I would actually completely agree on that, Cameron. I think that sin is a very destructive nature, going against our relationship with God and just pitting ourselves against God with poor choices, actually.
So, Luca, what does sin tell us about free will?
It tells us that, it actually, exists, If we didn't have free will, then sinning wouldn't be a thing because it's not a choice, right?
Yeah, since sin is basically going against reason and going against your own conscience, sin also proves that God gave us free will. So, in many ways, sin is extremely important at revealing how the world works. Luca, what would you say the difference between venial and mortal sin are?
Well, this is an important topic because this is how different denominations actually come to be denominations. With Protestants and other denominations saying that it's just through grace alone that we are saved, and not as well as our actions. But this really ties into some other theologies which state that all sin is equal. It's just an act against God. But in the Catholic tradition, we think that there are different degrees, such as it would be as bad as killing someone? No. So that's why we have differences between venial and mortal sins.
See, I would say that venial sin is just something that hurts you a little bit. It hurts your soul a little bit. But thanks to God's set up system, you can get around venial sin and be forgiven. But mortal sin turns man away from God, and it severs that deep connection that we have with God. Understanding the differences between venial and mortal sin helps us understand controversial topics about life. So now that we've established the difference between venial and mortal sin, Luca, I think we should go over the difference between go over what an intrinsically evil act is.
Well, let's look at the root of intrinsically. It means the nature of, right? So since sin is going against our nature, really looking at intrinsically evil acts are basically just acts which defy the very nature of how we should live and with our reason, right? So intrinsically evil acts, they're intrinsically evil in nature because they go directly against God, and they're not something very lighthearted. They're just a separation from us and God.
Yeah, essentially, intrinsic evil acts are undebatably wrong, no matter how they go down. So we need to avoid these at all costs. But with this, we can go into several heated debates about what is an intrinsically evil act. For today's podcast, I have a couple of heated arguments that me and my co-host, Luca Netto, will cover. So the first one is killing an innocent person intrinsically evil. What do we think, Luca?
I would say that killing an innocent person is intrinsically evil because we are made in God's image, and therefore we have dignity. So violating someone else's dignity by killing them is extremely bad and would probably be considered intrinsically evil.
Yeah, I would agree. I think for something to be intrinsically evil, it has to be undebatably bad. And when a person is innocent, they're undebatably good and undebatably innocent. So by killing said innocent person, you're actually severing that person from God entirely. And I would say that killing an innocent person is wrong in all scenarios.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think there is no situation in which killing an innocent person is actually the right thing to do.
So let's get into the next debate. And as you can see, this one is a little bit trickier. Would you say that serious lying is intrinsically evil?
Yes, I would say this one is much more hard to come to an actual decision to, but I would say that seriously lying is intrinsically evil because you are basically pitting yourself against another human and against God, because God does know your honest actions and he knows what you do, but the other person you're just lying to, and you may put them in a situation where they may sin because you lied and told them about a situation that isn't actually happening.
And I think it's clear that we need to talk about the difference between serious lying and lying. See, sometimes a white lie can really help a person. For example, if your friend does something really embarrassing in public, it's probably okay to lie to their friends about it sometimes so you don't expose them. But when you serious lie, you are making a big serious lie that is undoubtedly intrinsically evil. You are creating a lie that is just really, really bad.
Yes, I would agree that to make the distinction between lying and seriously lying is what can break or make it being intrinsically evil. I think lying, although is bad, I think it is not to the same degree that serious lying is bad. Just as Cameron was saying, like white lies, okay, they're little fibs that we tell, but they're not what makes or breaks a relationship.
So let's go to the next one. And this one is a big, big heated topic. Is war intrinsically evil? So, start out, I think war is bad. But I think that the outcomes of war can sometimes be positive. For example, if war was bad and we never went to war with Hitler in World War II, then Hitler would be racist and anti-Semitic to everyone, everywhere. And I think by stopping Hitler, by going to war, even though the war sucked, the action of stopping Hitler was good. What would you have to say, Luca?
I would have to say that, yeah, although there was many, many deaths during World War II and World War I think that inevitably Hitler's reign would have been awful, and therefore involving ourselves in the war to stop that was a necessary evil, even if it did result in some innocent casualties.
But I think there is definitely a line to be drawn. For example, sometimes America starts war that maybe not the greatest wars, that are pretty dicey. So I would say that, sometimes when we or other countries bomb other countries randomly, that's probably not the best use of war because of oil. What do you have to say about that, Luca?
I would agree that sometimes involving yourself in wars for selfish reasons, such as wanting more oil, does make war intrinsically evil. Just because there's no proper motivation to actually go to war unless you are fighting to keep people from harm. So going for war for oil, I would say, would be where the line is drawn and make war intrinsically evil, because you're going against basic human necessities, right? You're killing others for a material.
Look, I'm getting a call. It's from Seamus Arndt. Yes. We have a guest star,
Yes,
Seamus Arndt, to
Seamus
offer.
Arndt is our lovely guest today.
And today he is going to be offering his expert opinion onto if war is intrinsically evil.
Well, personally, I think how evil war is really depends on whether or not it needs just war theory. So wars that are driven to protect people and protect human rights are not intrinsically evil, because we are basically upholding God's law by involving ourselves in these wars. However, wars that are driven by purely political means, especially if they like use religion to disguise the way war works, that's more intrinsically evil because now you're just killing millions of people to basically just for pure political gain.
Yeah. Wow.
That's
God,
fascinating.
Seamus Arndt is so smart. I'm
He's just
so
a
glad
lovely
we
man.
invited this podcast.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on.
That was
you.
great.
Okay.
Okay, back to the
Podcast. But I think
Oh, hey, we're halfway through. You know what that means?
I think it's time for our sponsorship. The Luca Fairbanks
Today,
Directive.
Kalshi is sponsoring our podcast today.
Kalshi is sports gambling websites that allows you to easily pick between several outcomes to make big money. For example, in the Western Conference Finals, Victor Wembanyama has a 52% chance at winning Western Conference Finals MVP compared to Shai Gilgeous's 48% chance.
Yes, look at these beautiful stats.
And as you can see, I invested right here into Wemby before game one. And now I'm up because they won game one. God, isn't Kalshi magical, Luca?
Oh, it is the best. I use it every day.
I'm so happy that Kalshi reached out to us today. Download Kalshi and use our code Netto for 25% off on credits.
We're not liable for plagiarism. Back to the podcast.
So I think the next debate we're gonna get into is we should probably skip that one. Is paying taxes that partially go to fund something more reprehensible an intrinsic evil? And I'm gonna be honest, I don't think so. I think this is hard because you have to pay taxes,
Yeah, exactly. And even though we're forced, right? So paying taxes, it's not something that we can just get away from, right? So the responsibility is not on us, right? It's going back to like the nature of sin. Again, it's a choice, right? So if we're not able to make a choice, then we're not liable for the action of it, the sin of it.
I would absolutely agree. See, the issue is that sometimes we don't know everything that the government is up to. And I think that causes a lot of unknowing in the hearts of the citizens. And the fact of the matter is that when you pay your taxes, you don't always know where they're going to end up, and sometimes you don't get to choose. So sometimes when your money goes to Israel, you can't always decide if it goes there. What do you know about Israel?
I know about Benjamin Netanyahu.
I think paying your taxes is mandatory, and unfortunately, since you don't get to choose, it's not an intrinsic evil. Would you agree?
I would agree with that, yes. Since it is not a choice, the guilt does not lie on you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Me too.
Next up, we have, is it intrinsically evil to allow a dictator to run your country? What would you say about this, Luca?
I would say that since I'm not the one who decides if I'm being ran by a dictator, then it's not really, the sin is not placed on me, right? It would be on the dictator and how that chooses to run the country. Let's bring it back to World War II with Hitler, okay? So from Hitler's perspective, Hitler would be doing a massive sin, right? But from the people's perspective in Germany, it is less liable on them because it is not their choice to be dictator, right? So I don't think that it is intrinsically evil to allow a dictator because, well, they're a dictator. So by that nature, you don't really have a choice.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I think like another great case study on this is North Korea. I think the issue is that sometimes people don't know how good or bad their dictator is. Like, I don't think the North Koreans know that Kim Jong-un is all that. But I think the issue is that they don't have the means or wants always to overthrow Kim Jong-un. So I think this is a very clear non-intrinsically evil act because we don't always know what's going on with the dictator, and we don't always have the means to overthrow the dictator.
Yes.
And I think unless you can truly know and come together as a country and support the evil, that would be the only situation where it's intrinsically evil.
I would agree, yes.
I don't think the sin is placed on the individual who is just living in North Korea. So, yeah, do you have anything else to say about that?
Yeah, I would say this is kind of like the previous one we discussed, talking about paying taxes and how that could partially go to fund something morally reprehensible, right? Again, since it's not really our choice, then I would say that it's not intrinsically evil towards us, right? But if the things are going to something morally reprehensible, I think that act of the person who decides where it goes would be intrinsically evil.
Yeah, absolutely. So next up we have, is torture intrinsically evil? And you know, I'm thinking right out the gate, this one's a pretty clear yes.
Yeah,
Torture
this one's kind of cut and dry.
Torture is bad. Humans do not deserve to suffer, even if they did very bad things. And the act of torturing a person, it's not great. And I think it's very intrinsically evil. What do you have to say about this, Luca?
Yeah, I would completely agree with you, Cameron. I think that the torture is intrinsically evil because you are basically stripping away someone's dignity and you're just causing them unneeded pain and suffering. Even if they did a horrible action, it is not really up for you to decide how that should be taken care of, right? You shouldn't torture someone just because they did something wrong, right? We have due process and other things which allow for proper justice, right? So I think torture is intrinsically evil.
I would absolutely agree. And I think that in today's day and age, torture is not necessary. And the action of ever choosing it is a completely unreasonable, intrinsically evil act.
Yes, just like sin, right? It goes beyond our reason, right? It's against our reason. So I think that torture is intrinsically evil because it goes against reason, right? And goes against our nature.
That's great. So next up we have, is terrorism intrinsically evil? Luca, what do we think on this one?
I would say this one's also kind of pretty clear-cut and dry, just like torture, right? I would say that terrorism is intrinsically evil because, as we discussed earlier, is killing innocent people intrinsically evil, which we said yes, right? And terrorism can result in the lost lives of innocent civilians, right?
Yeah. If I was to, truly, I think terrorism is a really bad act. The destruction of property that leads to death. And in the action of hurting another country is bad. And especially when war is undeclared. You're not giving them any prep time or anything. For example,
9/11.
9/11. Let's talk about 9/11 for a little bit. So, 9/11 involved the crashing of a series of planes into some buildings. And it was a terrible, terrible, intrinsically evil act that resulted in the death of
Thousands of Americans.
Thousands of Americans.
Of innocent civilians.
Yeah. I just don't do terrorism.
I hate terrorism.
Me too, Luca. For the last big question of the day, we have, is child labor intrinsically evil? So, for this one, yes. But I don't think the child laboring is evil at all. Because they're just part of the system. And it's not their fault.
Forced. That's right. It's not on the child to do wrong by laboring, right? It's on the person who is hurting the child to do the labor.
You know, the evil higher-ups who create the system are truly the ones being intrinsically evil here.
Exactly.
But the child supporting their family by working in the Sheen factory, that's not on them. You know, they have to find a job somewhere.
Right, exactly. I would say that child labor is intrinsically evil just because again, let's think about choice. When, say, consent, right? That's 18, alcohol is 21, right? Consent means at that point you're willing and able to make the choice on your own, right? So child labor would be intrinsically evil because you're not able to make a realistic choice at that age on your own, right? So I think not being able to do that and being forced to labor would make child labor intrinsically evil.
Absolutely, Luca. Well, it looks like that's the end of our podcast. This was a seriously developmental, philosophical debate, which we covered some serious, heavy topics.
Yes.
But in the end, we were able to clearly distinguish between an intrinsically evil act and just an evil act. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't forget to hit that like button, share, and subscribe to the Netto Fairbanks Directive.
Mm-hmm.